Did I discuss that on the other side of increasing supply is another alternative? So regarding ANWR, like I said yesterday, it's this classic trade-off between getting more petroleum and suffering, giving up the land. I don't know if I told you this yesterday, but it just depends on your values whether we go with it or not. If you really value wildlife and wilderness and ecology, we don't drill. And if you really feel the urge to have more petroleum, then we do drill. It would be the same conversation if there was petroleum underneath the Sistine Chapel. A Catholic might say, no, we should leave that. Is it a Catholic building? Yeah. And so a Catholic might say, no, we should leave that alone. And somebody who doesn't care about Catholicism or architecture or Michelangelo would say, whatever, there's petroleum, let's go for it. If you care about nationalism, you would leave the Washington Monument. But if you're not really big on monumental piles of marble, then you might be like, well, whatever, let's just get the petroleum out. Saying that you want the petroleum more than you want wilderness is just about how much you value the wilderness and how much you want the petroleum. But there is one part of this conversation that we haven't been having, and this is the one part I want you to remember. I'm so fired. The one part that nobody talks about is we wouldn't need ANWR at all if American cars got 2 more miles per gallon. You see, on the other side of more supply is, of course, less demand. You don't hear a lot of people talking about making cars more efficient because nobody really makes money off you buying less things, except you. If people can sell you more petroleum, they make more money. So the conversation is always about supply, supply, supply. We got to get more, we got to get more, we got to get more. Because if you buy more, they have more money of your money. But of course, if you don't need that petroleum, then, you get to keep that money. You can invest that in education or in holidays or in clothing or in body modification. You could do all sorts of stuff if you didn't need to buy that gasoline. You could keep that money in your pocket. But nobody else makes money off that except our economy. And you. So that's not a very popular position. You don't hear about lowering demand. You just keep hearing about more supply. Because the more you buy, the more you're spending. The more you're buying, the more you're spending. Ugh! I just want to remind everybody that we would not need ANWR if consumer cars got 2 more miles per gallon on average. On average, you'd save about 10% of the money that you're currently spending on gasoline. So out of every $100, you'd get another $10 you could keep. That's like another meal or another t-shirt or another 1/100th of a shoe or something. So I always want to remind you, when people have the conversation about supply, it's always cheaper to cut demand. Because that leaves the money in your pocket, that leaves the wilderness on the ground, that leaves the CO2 out of the atmosphere so we get less climate change. And there's a whole lot of benefits to less demand. Everybody goes, oh, more supply, who cares about the cost? And it's like, well, if I like wilderness, I do. But how about all the other benefits of just plain old not buying more stuff, less demand? Okay. We should talk about coal. Before I get to coal, would anybody like to guess at some of these numbers? How much coal does the United States burn per year?
More than 1 billion tons.
More than 1 billion. A ton is 2,000 pounds, right? Yeah. So you're saying more than 2 trillion pounds?
That's a good sell, man.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm just asking. Anybody else?
Million tons.
And that's not a guess. That's a research. Thanks for looking on the internet. What?
1 million
1 million
tons.
tons? What do you think?
10 million.
10 million tons per year? That's a lot. How much? 10 tons?
4.5 pounds.
Okay.
As much as your mom.
So, yeah, get out your pencils because you're going to want to scribble these down because it's kind of amazing to come back to this number someday. You'll have a conversation with your mommy or your dad and you'll be like, hey, check out this number I heard. The year that we burned the most coal, which was about 6 years ago, we used 7 billion tons, which is 14 trillion pounds. Which comes out to 100,000 tons per hour. Which is 1,000 train cars per hour.
Makes sense.
Yes?
Coal burning goes on in plants and what other things?
It's almost entirely for electricity. There is a separate supply that I'm not counting for other industrial energy provisions, like heating water and other... But it's almost all for electricity. It's right around half of our electrical supply today, and it used to be more than half during the Bush administration. Yeah.
So 7 tons was burned in 2006?
No.
Yeah.
7 billion tons.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so 1 billion times what you just said.
We were very efficient.
Yeah, so let me give you a couple more of these numbers because I just find them to be very striking. If we're burning 100,000 tons per hour in this country, that means that we burn 20 pounds per man, woman, and child every single day. If you live in a household of 4, that means that your house that day burned off 80 pounds of coal that day, every day.
Does that mean coal's really efficient?
Well, coal's not very inefficient. You get a lot of heat when you light it on fire. But of course, making that into steam and electricity wastes about 1/3 of its energy potential. And then transmitting that through the wires wastes about half the electricity of the wire. So 3 units of energy at the power plant for 1 unit at your plug at the house. Now, if you consider that there are roughly 570 coal electricity plants in the United States, that means that there is, on average, just less than 2 railroad cars per hour reaching every single coal-burning power plant in America every hour of every day. Another way to think about this is 1,000 railroad cars are burned per hour. Another way to think about that is 1,000 railroad cars. Visualize that in your head for a minute. 1,000 railroad cars. How big would that be in the football field? 1,000 of them. So how high would you have to stack them in our football field? 1,000 railroad cars. We turn that into ashes and smoke every single hour.
You're saying railroad cars full of coal?
Yes, that volume of coal.
Is that a ton of coal?
No, a railroad car holds about 100 tons. So because we're burning 100,000 per hour, we burn about 1,000 railroad cars of coal per hour. So imagine how much of America's land volume we turn to ashes and smoke. 1,000 railroad cars per hour worth of America's land volume literally goes up in smoke except for the ashes that are left behind. That's a lot. Since we've been doing roughly that pace for many, many years, and let's shave off 1/4 for sensationalist statistics just for, playing it safe. As a 40-year average, that's a lot of dirt that we don't have anymore. Mountains that just went up in smoke. I find these to be really staggering statistics. I know it's kind of hard to imagine what 1,000 railroad cars looks like, but that's a lot of railroad cars. If somebody wants to do a quick little bit of math for me, you could figure out what a railroad boxcar is in cubic feet. Anybody know how wide a football field is? Anybody know?
45
50
yards.
something feet? Yards. It's not yards, because it's 100 yards long.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably 45.
So the
yards.
width... Nobody knows, huh? All right, screw it. I wanted to visualize how deep you'd have to pile a football field per hour. But anyway, I guess we'll come back to that number someday when somebody can tell me the width of a football field. Okay. So let's talk about coal. I want to show you guys a picture. Oh, maybe I can't because, oh yes, we have network. Excellent. I'd like to show you guys a picture if my network will allow me. Let me see. Come on, yes! Okay. Now, kids these days, they don't know anything about cultural references. But this is my house at 7 in the morning.
Lego.
When I walk out the door, my beautiful 3-year-old has laid out a booby trap of Legos for me. So Legos rule everything around me. See, kids these days, they don't even know what I'm talking about.
Is it football field?
All on Legos.
50 what?
53
Yards
yards.
wide? For real? Yards?
I think you're
So
counting
it's half as wide as it is long?
No, because it's 120 yards.
end zone.
All right. So maybe somebody could do the math for me. Cubic feet in a railroad boxcar, and then figure out how many of those it takes, how deep and thin. Okay. Legos rule everything around me, and so I have a Lego analogy for you. Imagine you have a giant, bean bag full of Legos. Okay, a big old bag of Legos. And they're all singles, they're loose. There's loose Legos in your bean bag. But you take those Legos in the bean bag and you knead them like dough. You add pressure and you massage that bean bag and you push on it, and squeeze it, and push on it. Does everybody agree that after a couple of minutes, some of the Legos might randomly stick together? And I'll have a bunch of loose Legos but a couple of doubles? Just randomly. I'm not going to build a Tyrannosaurus, I'm just getting a couple of lumps. Right? Do we agree so far?
Yes.
And then if I keep massaging it for more time, I might get some triples and even a couple of 4 Lego lumps, right? And if I keep going and I keep kneading this for weeks at a time, I'll get a couple of 10 clumps and maybe even a couple of 20 clumps to stick together. Because, sooner or later they'll line up and they'll click. And once they click, they stay stuck, right? So there is this stuff. Party foul. There's this stuff called peat. This is sterile. It's clean. It doesn't smell. You can eat it if you want. There might already be some on your table. There's nothing wrong with this stuff. It's perfectly clean. No big deal. Don't freak out. I guess you could eat it. It might be kind of gross, but you can eat it.
What is it?
What I'm throwing on your desk now is a substance called peat. It's spelled P-E-A-T. And get ready, you're going to write down some notes. Peat is, first of all, partially decomposed plant fiber. And it even looks like plant fibers, right? Doesn't that look like plant fibers to you?
It's tobacco.
Some kids say it looks like tobacco. Because, is a plant fiber like tobacco? I have that shirt. Does it have the word on the back, or does it have the girl on the back? Yeah, that's like mine. It's partially decomposed plant fiber. And do you guys realize that if you massage your Legos for a long, long time, you'll get a couple of big old chunks of Lego? Now consider that plant fibers, write this down, are made of lignin, L-I-G-N-I-N, lignin, L-I-G-N-I-N, lignin. And lignin is a carbon compound that makes up plant fibers. So this was my Lego analogy. If you take this peat, Diego, that's gnarly. You gotta let the sneeze out, bro.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, for real, bro. You can't contain that. It's not good for your system. I'm gonna make that up. The same way that you can. The same way that you can stick Legos together with heat and pressure, you can stick the carbons together from lignins and make longer carbon chains. So, please look up. Here comes everything you need to know about coal, all at once. It starts as peat, which is, shallow, near the surface. It's very wet. Peat is plant fibers, partially decomposed plant material. Near the surface, it's very high in moisture content. And now, please look up. As you add heat and pressure, that's going to squeeze out the water and make more carbon bonds to increase the energy content. That's everything you need to know about coal. Jack took a 30-second nap and he just woke up and kind of snuck up on you there. Sorry, buddy. Everything you know about coal is that you add heat and pressure over time, which squeezes out the moisture. You'll notice that as the arrows get bigger, the droplets get smaller. And you'll also notice that as the arrows get bigger, the E's get bigger for more and more and more energy content. The dirtiest coal is the wettest coal. Because please look up, the impurities that we're really worried about are sulfur oxides in particular. You probably remember that oxides plus water makes acids. We talked about that, didn't we? If not, write that down in your notes. Oxides plus water makes acids. So by squeezing out the water content, you've also squeezed out most of the impurities.
What's an example of an oxide?
Of an oxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, nitrogen trioxide, anything that ends with oxide. So the peat is how you start this conversation. And as you add heat and pressure, your carbons stick together, making more energy content. Awesome. Heroic. Audrey Kramer not here today? Maddie Cutler? Not here today. And so you've got everything you need to know about coal. If you'll remember this diagram, you'll remember that heat and pressure goes up, so energy goes up, and thus moisture content goes down, so impurities go down. This is the highest quality coal because it's the driest, the cleanest, and the most energy.
Moisture and what goes down?
What? And impurities. On this side, this is the worst coal because it has the least energy and the most impurities. Yeah.
What is the coal that you commonly use?
In the United States, we have the most of this kind. We'd rather not use it. We had a bit of this and we've used almost all of it already. Yeah.
Got the training
Huh.
So in a football field, you fit 34 different coal carts on a football field, and you'd have to stack them 29 coal carts high for it to get 1,000.
29 cars high? So that'd be how many feet tall?
Don't know how tall.
29 times the height of a box car.
Right. I forget.
That'd be awesome. That's probably like 8 feet, 9, maybe even 10 feet. So we're talking like upwards of 200 feet no matter what. So we evaporate every hour a football field at about 200 some odd feet tall. All right, back to me now. But I can't be 34. That can't be right.
382 feet high.
Dang. Thank you. You translated your feet to yards?
Yes.
Dang. All right. History of coal in America. Check this out. It's kind of amazing. It goes way back to the good old days when Hopi Indians used coal to fire clay. Even from a satellite, you can see the big streaks of coal that they found. And they would trade with other tribes, and coal has been a part of American life for a long time, even before it was American. Europeans came here knowing about coal. So as soon as they came, they knew what to look for, and it was found very, very early. 1670s, that's like Pilgrim's days. That's like Happy Thanksgiving with the Indians days.
Happy.
Or is it? Before we were much of an independent nation, we already were mining coal. And has anybody here seen the quote-unquote Zoolander movie? Where he wears the overalls and gets the cough from the black lung or something? Yeah, like that. Thank you. So that black lung thing and these types of miners with the overalls and the pickaxes, that was for real at some point, but that's ancient history now. Coal-built America, you guys know that there are many countries where all electricity is now solar power, because if you're starting from today, it's cheaper to do solar power than it is to do the alternative. Right? You guys know that? In the United States, we got to replace the alternative, so it's more expensive. Remember that in the United States, when we got started, we built our nation around coal as an energy source because we knew that had worked out for Europe. So during the 1800s, as we grew as a nation with coal at the front of our economic growth. Any of those drawings you see of like westward expansion and wagon trains, all the metal, that was all forged using steel. If you look at the history of the American economy, it almost perfectly overlaps with the history of American coal use, especially in the early days. It was the only way that we made steel in this country. It was the business that built the first vertically integrated monopoly in this country. You know what vertical integration is?
Yeah.
Where you monopolize by owning all levels of the business. Have you guys heard about that? Vertical versus horizontal?
Yeah.
So, this guy was called King Coal because he had like the first top to bottom monopoly. So he owned the dirt with the mineral rights, and he had the company that ran the miners, and he had the company that built the axes, and he had the company that made the trains, and he had the company that owned the tracks, and he had the company that made the tracks, so he had the company that could transport the coal. So top to bottom. He could profit getting it out of the ground, he could profit moving it, he could profit burning it. And today, we call the industry King Coal, but back then, we called him King Coal. When Thomas Edison started thinking about making electricity, you might be curious to know that the first electrical power plant was coal. Any of you that are interested in the history of labor, the labor movement in the United States, if you like the 40-day work week and the idea of minimum wage and of like national holidays and overtime and labor protections, the labor movement was born of coal miners. What's up, Tina? Was born of coal miners. The first federal intervention in a labor dispute was over coal. The first mechanized factory to replace human workers was so you could move the coal more easily. And by the way, that inspired Ford to make the assembly line to have the stuff moving instead of have the people moving. So the mechanization of coal inspired Ford to make the assembly line model for building cars. Major, really famous labor disputes and labor massacres were about coal. But by the mid-1930s, the petroleum thing was getting pretty hot. Gasoline and natural gas started to be commodities. And in 1950s, London scared everybody. You guys know what smog stands for? Smoke and fog? Smog. Funny fact about smog, and this is a key detail that you need to know later in the atmosphere unit. Nothing gives out smog. Coal burning doesn't give off smog. It gives off the ingredients that become smog in the atmosphere. Because smog is called secondary pollution. You make the ingredients, and the atmosphere goes, voila! And it spits out the smog. So we throw the flour into the air, we throw the eggs into the air, we throw the butter into the air, a little bit of milk, and voila, the atmosphere makes you craze. Delicious. So of course, because England had all that coal infrastructure and had that famous London fog, you've heard of the London fog, right? Like it's a really foggy place. That's why Jack the Ripper could hide in plain sight, and that's why they make those jackets that are called London fog. So, because London is really foggy, there's always the fog in the air and the smoke. In the 1950s, they had this giant disaster where people died on their way home from work or on their way out to work. 4,000 people dropped dead in the streets or dropped dead when they hit their house. Because smog burns your lungs. It's kind of like breathing fire a little bit. Yeah?
Wait, wasn't there a lot of fog, smog in LA in the 1980s?
Yeah.
Did that kill people?
Not nearly as directly as this. By the 1980s, we learned our lesson, so please look up. Based on what happened in London, we all got scared, and so we had clean air laws. As soon as we noticed smog becoming a problem in our urban areas, especially Los Angeles and Denver, we decided, wait a minute, this smog thing is kind of scary. We should make some laws to protect our people or something. And so we sort of limited the ingredients that make smog, and that's helped us keep it, like kind of bearable. What happened in London was kind of a fluke. I mean, the amount of the amount of fog you get in London is pretty unique to London. So their smog was kind of unique. And it seemed like coal might die, but then you've also heard about the embargo, the oil embargo, the OPEC embargo. Remember the 1970s where we made that Volvo car because petroleum was really hard to get for a little while? The LCP, the Light Component Project. So we made that because OPEC was holding on to their petroleum. So right when the United States was like, no, we don't want smog, we got petroleum, it's cool. Then we went, wait a minute, we don't have petroleum? And we realized that that was another really bouncy market. And at the same time, we figured out some pretty cool technology. Check this out. It turns out, instead of digging holes in the ground to get the petroleum, by the 1970s we had big machines. We could just push the top off the top of the mountains. It's called mountaintop removal. So you see, back in the day, we used to take little tiny shovels and picks, and we would get the cream filling out of the Oreo. But then somebody said, wait a minute, you can just take the top off the Oreo and then just scrape away all the cream filling at once. And if you'll excuse my Oreo analogy, which is making your stomach grumble, I can hear them. We did that exact same thing with coal. We just pushed the tops off the mountains. It's called mountaintop removal. So by the late 1970s, we're back in business. We're blowing the tops off the mountains. We're shipping around all these train cars full of coal. All the new power plants couldn't be coal anymore because coal is dirty. Don't forget, coal makes a lot of revolution. Okay? So starting in the 1970s, you couldn't make a new coal-burning power plant. All new plant construction starting in the 1970s was natural gas or hydroelectric or other types. And the legislation made it harder and harder and harder. But coal was so cheap. Hanna starts her brand new hoity-toity, highfalutin natural gas plant. And Jose's got his 1930s coal-burning power plant, and she's like, my energy is clean and good for the environment. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, lady. My stuff's just really cheap. And so coal stayed in business. And then coal went really, really big. Because one way to grow your economy is to make the energy cheap. That brings down the cost of making stuff, so you make stuff for less money and sell it for the same amount of money, so you get more profit. Unfortunately, you're borrowing from the future. The economic benefits usually got to be repaid later when people start getting sick, or when your water gets more expensive, or when climate change starts to hurt you. But we had a dude in the White House that made it really easy to do coal. And by many measures, the heyday of coal was not the 1300s with the Hopi, and not the 1700s with the start of America, and not the 1800s with our economic boom and our westward expansion. The boom of petroleum actually seems to have been the year 2007 or so. Sorry, that's the petroleum and coal. The boom of coal was around 2007. You see, when these guys took office, right away they said, wait a minute, this Clean Water Act, it's okay to do this, because when you put the top of the mountain into the canyon, there is no river anymore, so you're not wrecking the river, because show me the river. And everybody goes, really?
Wait, what?
Exactly. Sabina, why don't you guys just finish your conversation outside? Because Jackie's always distracted, and she's like trying to learn. After class, she goes, please, I just want to learn. Make Sabina shut up. And I'm like, yeah, I'll make her shut up. I got you, Jackie. Don't worry about it. We're cool. You see, if you just dump the top of the mountain into the river, there's no more river. So Clean Water Act hasn't been violated because there's no more river, so there's no river. So what are you talking about? What river? And all of a sudden, coal's back, and it's cheap. And all of us hippie environmentalist types, we were like weeping, like, oh my God, the mountains, they're taking the tops off the mountains. So we all voted for hope and for change. And we're like, yeah, come on, go get him. Doesn't he look young?
Are you sure that's from this? Are you sure that's not from this?
This is probably not from the year 2000. No, it's probably...
That's probably when he was being...
So maybe he was 17. I don't care. The point is, a lot of us had high hopes that coal would take a nosedive, but actually, you know, for the last few elections, the energy sector has given the same amount of money for both parties. They're like, here, Republican guy, go win. And then they're like, here, Democrat guy, go win. Who cares? Just somebody give us back our business. So whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, it doesn't matter. They're going for whatever. And there are differences, and you should follow those differences, and you should vote. But just when I thought that my buddy Barack Obama would pull the rug out from underneath the coal, he's like, no, don't worry about it. We're going to go with coal. It's cool. And he started talking about this stuff called clean coal. Let's talk about that. Number 26. You can chemically change coal to make it cleaner. It's called low sulfur coal. You have notes, number 26, right? So low sulfur coal, you can do that, but it's really expensive and nobody wants to do that, and kind of takes government subsidies to make it happen, but nobody wants the government to subsidize because nobody wants to pay taxes, and nobody wants to pay our government. So all the coal burning states where they're like, yeah, we can do coal, it's clean coal, they also say, yeah, but we can't spend any money to make it clean coal. So yeah, you can make low sulfur coal, but nobody's making it. Or not many people anyway. You can make high-tech boilers that burn extra hot so you get less emissions, but nobody makes new coal plants. Most of the coal plants are old coal plants. But those 572 or something, almost all of them are ancient. You can scrub your emissions. Anybody know what scrubbing is? Spray water on the smoke. Anybody know why you want to spray water on the smoke?
Goes down.
Oh yeah, you condense it, but then what? Take what? It's still pretty hot. There's a fire underneath it. Kinda. See, watch this. Anybody know what happens when you mix oxides in water? You get
Acid.
But if you mix those oxides plus the water in the smokestack, you can capture those acids and deal with it as managed hazardous waste instead of letting those oxides go up in the air and come down as acid rain on Blake's beautiful dome piece. So we keep those sulfur oxides out of the atmosphere by combining them with water in the smokestack. That's called scrubbing. And yeah, we do that. We do that all over the place now. Barack Obama got really excited about gasification and liquefaction, where you grind it up into a gas or you blend it up into a liquid. Both of these help lower pollution, but both of these are super expensive. So yes, we can do it, but practically speaking, no, not really, we don't do it. And there's one last problem with coal mining, which is, just getting it out of the ground is dirty. Anybody know what happens when you take a big chunk of iron of some sort and you leave it out in the weather? It'll rust, right? You guys know the scientific term for that?
Oxidizing.
Oxidizing, which means you attach oxygen, right? So it's an oxide. You guys know that rust is iron oxide? And so when you mix that oxide with water, what do you get?
Acid.
So now watch. The stuff that's been underground for a long time, is there any oxygen underground? No, there is not, because it's underground. So when you dig up stuff from underground, like, hey, look, I dug up this plastic water bottle. This hasn't seen oxygen for like a gajillion years. And then you just go, oh, it's not coal. We'll just leave it in the pile over there. And that pile over there sits out in the air. What's it going to do first of all? Oxidize, because there's oxygen everywhere. And then when it rains, that's going to make
Acid rain.
acids. Not acid rain, it's going to make acid runoff. It's called acid mine drainage. Check it out, I got some vocab for you. Tailings is the stuff you pull out of the ground from the mine that's not your target material. So when you make a hole, you take out a bunch of tailings and then you take out the coal. Those tailings, whatever reacts with oxygen, will oxidize. Take it out, and then it rains. And then Edward Bertinsky takes this beautiful photograph. It's a river of acid mine drainage.
Is it red?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a beautiful photograph. It's supposed to look like the ground is bleeding. And I think that is his metaphoric meaning. So check it out. This is a really famous photograph of nickel tailings. See, they were mining for nickel. But when the tailings get wet, they make acid drainage. And here's the really famous one. This is also nickel tailings. He photographed that in Ontario, Canada.
Canada, they don't do anything wrong
Yeah,
there.
they don't do anything wrong in Canada. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that his photographs aren't digitally retouched. Bro, I don't know, man. I can't call him a liar. I can't say he's honest. I don't know. But I believe that they are that color. Because you know what makes your blood red, right? Iron oxide. The hemoglobin is red because the iron is holding oxygen. Iron oxide. So I want to remind you, some people talk about more supply, like, hooray, the U.S. has a bunch of coal. And you look around at the map and it's like, holy crap, that's a lot of coal. But can you guys see the color coding?
There's no good coal.
That's right. The United States has a lot of coal is the good news, but the only high quality stuff is those 3 little stains in Pennsylvania. And the only so-so quality is that one little blue puddle on the border between Wawa and Oklahoma. Aurora.
What's the light blue?
It's in
leak.
that.
That's water.
Huh? Now back to me, please. See, the bad news is, good news, we got a lot of coal. Bad news, it really sucks. Supposed to the dirty guy. So everybody wants to talk to you about cleaning coal. Like, yes, it is theoretically possible, but in the meantime, we're burning the dirty coal. And everybody can talk about the gasification and the liquefaction, but just getting it out of the ground is nasty. And everybody can talk about grinding it up and doing the chemical thing and the low sulfur coal. And you can wash the coal. I'm not kidding. Like, there's literally like a solution with soaps that you can wash it. And yes, you can scrub, and most power plants scrub nowadays, but it's still nasty. Yeah.
Is it prettier to burn the like lower energy coal than the higher energy?
Yes, it has more impurities in it. So per unit of energy, it's the same amount of CO2. Remember that. When you're relying on carbon bonds, energy and CO2 are always proportional because it's the same carbon bond, same carbon, same CO2. But the impurities are higher in the low quality. That's what makes it low quality. There's all the other stuff in the way. And people talk about carbon sequestration, but that's something else we haven't figured out yet. And let's not forget, coal mines blow up and miners get buried, and it's never fun when that happens. Okay. I told you I was going to rush, but it's kind of interesting, but I was going to rush, right? I've got 11 minutes to do one last study goal, and this is a really important one, number 27. And you'll probably have to take a bit of notes on this one, so don't say I didn't warn you. First of all, this is basically some mix of sand and rock with a little bit of petroleum. A good ratio, if you want to write this down, it might help you remember, is for every ton of rock, you get about 12 gallons of petroleum.
For every
Ton of rocks, you get about 12 gallons of petroleum. That's an average, so there are some that are better and some that are worse, but as an average, we're talking 12 gallons per ton. So that's under 100 pounds of petroleum for every 2,000 pounds of rock, making it less than 5% petroleum per unit of rock. Okay? There's a lot of names for this. It's some sort of a petroleum word followed by some sort of a geology word. And I don't mean to be confusing, but that's the best answer I can give you. Like bituminous clays, tar, sand, oil, shale, some sort of a petroleum word, some sort of a geology word. There's a million different kinds, all the same idea. Some petroleum word plus some geology word. Takes a lot of energy because for every ton of that sand, you're going to get about 12 gallons of petroleum. Or for every ton of that rock, you're going to get on average about 12 gallons of petroleum. This is, write it down, hard rock mining. No pumping, no like pressurizing. This is like digging it up with a shovel or a bulldozer. And it takes a lot of energy to lift up rocks. But then remember, it takes a lot of energy again to grind up the rocks. And it takes a lot of energy again to heat up and wash that material. Because what you do essentially is grind up and then cook the rocks, which is a favorite thing for we environmentalists, because cooking rocks is a bad habit, because you guys know that means smoking crack cocaine, right? Cooking rocks. They're like, hey, I'm tired of telling you, you gotta quit cooking the rocks, bro. And they're cooking the rocks like your bad crack habit, or also cooking the rocks like the oil shale habit.
Or both.
We laugh about crack addiction. It's funny. Yes.
In Canada they do coal, so Rob Ford might be applicable.
Oh! Rob Ford. He's Canadian. That's a political current event joke. International political current event jokes. Don't worry. You're not supposed to know that stuff. Mayor of Toronto has had some flamboyant struggles with addiction.
With everything.
Essentially, you mine the rocks, you grind the rocks, you heat the rocks about 500 degrees Celsius. Then you float off the petroleum, and then you have a bunch of liquid slurry waste and a bunch of dirty rock waste. They have to build these giant donuts of dirt and then fill them up with water. They're like artificial lakes of all that liquid pollution and let the water evaporate. Then they have to monitor those ponds and pay biologists to make sure that the ducks don't come nest there, because ducks are like, ooh, a big lake, and then they die. Then they got to bury all those rocks again, which is really expensive because you got to lift the rocks out and then you got to lift them and put them back in. And so this is an extremely energy-intensive process. Write this down. It's the most energy we've ever spent to get energy out. In terms of fossil fuels, anyway. It's the most energy we've ever spent to get fossil fuels out of the ground. There's this famous conversion factor. If you get 4 barrels of petroleum, it took 3 barrels of petroleum to make that. So you got to keep 3 in-house to make the next 4, and you can only sell 1 of them because you got to get the 3 in-house so you can sell 1 of them. And so there's a few facts you must know. It is energy intensive, as I said, because of all this trouble, which means it's very expensive, as I said, because of all this petroleum you've got to spend in order to just make the one you get to sell. For one thing, that means it's not a reliable market. You can only do this when petroleum is very expensive. So Canada is just waiting for Saudi Arabia to run out. And OPEC is like, oh crap.
Oh, crap.
When we run out, we lose our power because these other guys are going to take over. These guys aren't in a hurry to sell it. They know that if they hold on to it, they'll eventually be able to sell it later. They can only sell it right now. The tipping point is right around $100 a gallon, give or take a little bit. Right around $100 a gallon. Yes, Bloomer, it takes a ton of practice. You should work on that. No, so don't worry about it. I'm rolling my little tobacco cigarette. It's Pete, guys. It's cool. It's just Pete. Just in case.
Tobacco. Tomato.
You can only do this at around $100 a barrel. So whenever the price of petroleum gets below $100 a barrel, they usually will shut down these mines and say, never mind everybody, you're fired. And then when the prices start coming up again, they're like, okay everybody, come back to work, let's go for it. And they open the doors and they start running the cars. What's that big barrel? And it's like, uh-oh, market's getting soft, everybody, you're fired. So these are boom and bust mines. They only work at the boom, not at the bust. You should know that this is considered to be the dirtiest petroleum. And let me explain. 700 milliliters of Saudi Arabia petroleum gasoline is the same as 700 milliliters of Canada oil shale gasoline. Does that make sense to everybody? Because it's gasoline, it's gasoline, it's gasoline, it's gasoline, it's gasoline, it's gasoline. But here's the difference. Getting this stuff out of petroleum means its production harm was about 150 milliliters of gasoline. So you pay the 700 when you burn it, plus the 150 it took to get it. But for the one you got out of Canada, it's the 700 you burn it, plus the 2,800 that or 2,100 that it took to get it out of the ground. So this is dirtier from Canada because of all the pollution made in its extraction, not in its consumption. You know what I mean by that? So look, I got 3 minutes and I mean to use them. Have any of you heard about this political controversy about the quote-unquote Keystone Pipeline? Anybody heard of this? It's like on the news sometimes. Keep your eyes open. In the next election, you'll have to vote about this, so keep your eyes open. It's a big topic in the next couple elections. What they're trying to do, please look up, is take all of that Canadian petroleum from this process and get it down here to where we refine it in the United States. Putting it on train tracks turns out to be kind of explosively dangerous. Like, it's explosive. It's dangerous. It's also very expensive to put it on trains. So everybody's like, hey, look, let's just build a pipeline. And they want to call it the Keystone Pipeline. Okay? So Canada has all these train tracks that come to right here. And then they're like, look, if you give us the pipeline, we can deliver petroleum to the United States forever. Because remember we talked about peak oil? And there's like the peak of the easy stuff, but there's a lot of stuff left. Remember I showed you that big pie chart? And it's like we've already used up this much, and we can't really do anything about this stuff. And there's all this that we just won't be able to get. Well, we can get it. If you're willing to pay for it, we can get it. So Canada says, look, peak oil, forget about it. We've got you covered. Well, give me a minute. I'm sorry, give me a minute. When you hear the people that want more supply, they're like, look, Canada's got plenty. We just need the pipeline. And the environmentalists say, no. Hold on, please stop making noise. I'm going to stop. If you're late, you can tell your teachers to call me. Extension 342, but I'm going to finish this. It's not about the pipeline. Environmentally speaking, the pipeline has almost no footprint. It really doesn't matter. It's not that big of a deal. For the amount of money we'd make out of that, the environmental costs of the pipe are irrelevant. The problem is America doesn't want to create, the environmentalists don't want to create a market for that dirty industry. It's not about the pipeline. It's about the method of extraction. Remember when people talk about more supply, there's always the alternative of just lowering our demand. Okay, now we're done.